Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and dancing friends. Here we are again on a nice Tuesday, sunny afternoon, lucky for some, and not on a lockdown yet. So for another incredible Zoominar. And today we have another great young couple. Very proud of this young amateur. So WDC and Amateur League. So let's introduce and be happy to have Kyle and Izabela. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Marco, for the introduction. Good afternoon to everybody in Europe. And if you're watching from different continents, then perhaps good morning to you, or even good evening or good night. We very much appreciate you being here. And of course, we would like to say a huge thank you to the WDC AL for the very kind invitation. It is a true honor to be part of this wonderful Zoominar series. And I think it's given everybody such a boost during such a very difficult time. So we hope that you watching at home today will also enjoy our hour-long lecture. And also a big thank you to the CDEB, who I believe have also collaborated with the WDC to make this all possible. So thank you from both of us. So on to business. And the topic of our lecture, as you know, is qualities in WDC ballroom dance. Now, we felt that we should actually make a distinct difference between quality as an overall thing and a single quality. So what we would say the ingredients are to make the perfect overall quality couple. And of course, in our federation or in the other federations, we should have the same qualities, but it's down really to our choices and our preferences of which we use best. So in preparation for this lecture, we actually posed a question to 20 individual dancers. I asked 10 very high level amateur and professional couples, individuals. And I also asked the same question to 10 lower level medalist dancers on their opinions on what quality is in ballroom dancing. So I asked them quite simply to define in either one word or in one sentence what they think quality is. And the results were very, very interesting because although all of the top 10 high-level dancers, they gave very different answers in how they worded it or how they approached it, the result was that they were all on the same page, and more importantly, on the same page as Izabela and myself, which I will come to in a moment. The medalist dancers who I asked gave a very different answer, a lot more concise and not the full story. So I did promise the top couples that I wouldn't use their specific examples, so I won't. But the general answer was for the high level dancers, the quality is the balance or the perfect execution of every single category in ballroom dancing. It's the harmony of all of these different categories coming together to produce an overall quality performance. Now, interestingly, when I received the answers from the medalist dancers, 8 out of the 10 all gave the answer that for them, quality is good technique. Now, of course, that is true. That is one part of a much greater story. And the other 2, they took a more musical approach, a more expressive approach. And they said for them, it's the look of easiness, the look of musicality that you can see in a couple. And again, absolutely right, but it is only one part of the full story. So for us, it was very clear to see that there is a difference in the understanding of quality in ballroom dancing based on the level of the individual or the couple. And as I say, the top couples really do have a very thorough understanding of what quality is. So what we decided to do, therefore, was to try to introduce you to as many qualities, individual qualities, as we possibly could. If you like, a recipe book showing all of the ingredients that we believe should be thought about, at least, if not worked on and produced and developed as much as possible. And as I said at the start before, it is then down to your own personal preference of how much of these ingredients you put in or how little. So we have spared no expense at all on this lecture, and we have provided you with a beautiful artist's easel showing our pieces of work. So we've split this for simplicity into 6 large categories, and then each of those we will demonstrate and show and talk about the individual kind of ingredients that are all part of these particular bubbles. So for those of you, we were very worried about this. If you are watching at home and it's showing a mirror image of the screen, then we do apologize for that, but hopefully you can all see this clearly. But nevertheless, I will talk you through the board. So the 6 main categories, we have technique, we have mechanics, we have presentation, we have music, we have choreography, and character. That for us are the 6 large categories. Now, some of these are very much interconnected. So you can only improve one thing if you also improve the other thing with it. However, some of the other categories, particularly those connected to presentation, they can be improved and actually perfected at any level without any direct influence to the other categories or ingredients. So my very glamorous assistant will now reveal the subcategories of technique. Thank you, Izabela. Perfectly done. So we have listed, as I said, a few ingredients, and we hope again you can see that clearly, but I will talk you through. So as far as technique itself is concerned, this can involve the footwork, of course, the heels, the toes, the balls of foot, also the rise of the foot, also the foot pressure, all connected together to technique. The other subcategory would be understanding each figure. So you need to look at the figure, understand how it connects importantly to other figures. We will talk about that also a little bit later anyway. But yes, you need to understand each figure, understand the technique of each figure, which is also connected therefore to the next category, which is rotation and turn. And we've written a question here that you should always ask yourself, how much? How much does it turn? Why does it only turn that much? Sometimes, for example, we've all been there, we overturn a particular figure and suddenly it leaves us with not a lot left to do on the next preceding figure. So you need to understand if it should overturn, underturn, or the correct amount of turn. And also the alignments. So again, this is connected directly to the understanding of each figure. All of this pretty much you can find in the technique book. It is absolutely timeless. It does not go in and out of fashion. It is there to help you. So you should look at the alignments. It's very easy, particularly in a competitive situation, to overcook the figures. And that technique is always there. Those clear rotations, turns, alignments, directions, all very, very important. Now, the alignments themselves, as you may be able to see, we can split not just in the figures of the room, but also alignments to our partners. Of course, very, very important. You should understand the different hip positions and how they change between the figures, etc., etc. So this is a good example of how these are very much interlinked together. And also the next folder will be the same. So if we may. Thank you very much. So the second big topic was mechanics. And this is, of course, very closely linked to the technique, but this is much more to do with the actual movement itself, not just the leg movement, but also the body movements. Now, a word of warning, we have left off intentionally what we feel is the most important category or subcategory of all, and that is connected with this mechanics, and we will reveal that a little bit later. So please be patient with us. So this, we can see, involves sway, it involves rise and fall, and it involves the actions of CBM or CBMP, which are, of course, closely linked together. Now, as you can see from our writing, this is Izabela's writing, by the way, so hope you can see it clearly. We have 3 questions that you absolutely, in our opinion, should ask yourself every time, which is why, when, and how much. So them 3 questions, that group of questions, can be applied to these 3 categories very, very well indeed. And this is where the basis of our practical side of the lecture will go. So as far as sway is concerned, as an example, why do we sway? When do we sway? And the big question, how much do we sway? And as I say, this can apply also to rise and fall. This can also apply to the CBM and the CBMP. And this is, as I say, the latter part of our lecture. So for now, on to the next slide. Perfect. So we come to presentation. Now, this involves quite a lot. And as I mentioned before, a lot of this can be improved or perfected without the need for technique. So going through a few of the subcategories now, we have outfits, of course, all part and parcel of the overall performance. Now, of course, you can have the very, very best tail suit, the very best dress on the floor, but it will not make you a better dancer as such. But of course, it can make you feel good and it will make you look good. So it is, of course, an important factor, but completely independent. We do feel that the overall presentation of couples on the dance floor these days is of a very, very high level. You know, girls in particular, they're spending rather a lot of money these days on their, you know, professional hair and makeup. Of course, the dresses, as we know. But even, of course, the boys, you know, a lot of them, you see them in the hair salons getting their hairs done directly before the competition. No stone is left unturned these days, and we do feel that the overall presentation is of a very, very high level, and that is, of course, excellent to see. But moving on to other variations on presentation, we have posture. Of course, again, you can perfect your posture independently. Maintaining it throughout the dance is another story entirely, of course, but you can have an awareness of posture, of improving your posture without the necessity of perhaps, you know, good knowledge or technique. The frame. Now, we do appreciate that some coaches do not like the word frame because that refers to something which is rigid, which is why I've split that into 2 categories here, which is the structural and the cosmetic. Now, we do require a certain amount of structure in order to, of course, support each other. But we also have a cosmetic side to the frame. And very important to mention is that this should be breathable. Okay, if we just lock everything into place, it can look quite good for a certain amount of time, but then without the other ingredients, that can certainly diminish, particularly in a competition environment. This is also something that we will touch on a little bit later in our lecture, if you're still indeed with us and indeed awake. The next one, connected to presentation, is facial expressions. Again, it is part of that dancing, can be perfected and improved without the necessity, once again, for, you know, a technical understanding or knowledge. Now, I've split this also into 2 categories. We have natural, and we have acting. Now, of course, everybody hopes to feel very good on the competition floor, but I think we all know that's not always the case. So there are times when you just don't feel very good, but you must still show that you're feeling good. Nobody except yourself knows how you're feeling. So don't show anybody what you're feeling. But of course, that can work in another way, because you might be feeling great. You might be feeling very, very excited and bubbly, but you might need to show something more serious, or, you know, create a darker sort of atmosphere, particularly for a tango. On that point, we feel actually very in a difficult position compared to the Latin dancers, because their first dance is, of course, the cha-cha-cha, which is lively and bubbly. Our first dance is the waltz, very calm, often quite a sad dance even. And we remember the feeling when we made our first Blackpool final together. We were, of course, on cloud 9. And unfortunately, what we had to do was not to show that for the waltz. So we had to actually act to show a more contained, more careful approach to the dance. Whereas we feel the Latin dancers have a much bigger advantage in this. A few years after we made the final, we saw one particular couple, not mentioning anybody's names, who were, of course, thrilled to bits to be in their first amateur Latin final. And they went on that floor and just went absolutely wild in the cha-cha-cha because they were allowed to. So they actually didn't need to act at all. So acting is not always a negative thing. Sometimes it is necessary to show a certain type of performance. Moving on to the final part of this, which is presenting each other. Okay, now we can do this, of course, in between dances. Whilst we're waiting for the dance to start, we should have a certain rapport with each other. Again, not showing anybody how we're truly feeling, but also we can present each other during the dance. So this is connected to the idea of shaping and line figures. They are there predominantly for the man to show off his lady to the best of their abilities. It's not always about the man. Did I really just say that? Did I just say that? But it's not. It is definitely about presenting our partner, but during the performance overall, we should be, of course, presenting each other. Next slide, if you would. Okay. So the next big topic is music, a very big factor. And as you can see, it does involve quite a lot. Now, we will only talk you through these. We will not explain into any great detail, but please feel free in your own time, ask your teachers, you know, to develop your own understanding of some of these ideas. So the first one in the top right corner is phrasing. So we all like to be with the correct phrasing. We do feel it's very important, because if you're dancing against the phrasing, on the wrong side of the phrasing, it can actually diminish the power or the speed or the positivity that you're sometimes trying to show. So you can put a lot of energy into it, but if you're on the wrong side of that music, the music almost takes it away. So very important to definitely think about. Also connected, of course, is the timing itself. So many figures, especially those with and beats, syncopations, they can have different timings. And this is something that we will discuss later on. So for now, please be patient again. Syncopations and beats. So again, and beats can be placed in different parts of the bar of music, and it will give a very, very different look and a different feeling. So this particular bubble will be explained a little bit more in detail later on. The next one on the top left is understanding the beat values and the lengths. So for example, if you take the waltz, we know it's 1, 2, 3. But when you actually go into the detail of it, the 1 beat is relatively large, because that's, of course, our drive action, usually. The 2 beat is extremely stretched to the point where, you know, we can't hold it any longer. And this is really what we would call the musical beat. Okay. And of course, the 3 beat is usually a collection into the next figure. So it is very, very short. So to demonstrate the waltz, it would be 1, 2, 3 along those lines. So they're not all the same. Similar idea in foxtrot. You have, of course, we generally count in slows and quicks. Not all quicks are the same. So for example, a continuous weave, those quicks are very, very calm. Other quicks are much brighter, much sharper. So it is definitely worth experimenting to find your optimum. Musicality. Now this is very much open to debate. So we've actually put the question here, what is it? And, you know, we've had different variations on this with opinions. A lot of people say that musicality is the ability to play with the music, and it absolutely is. Again, connected to the beat values. You can stretch beats, you can diminish beats, you can really play with those boundaries. But also we feel that musicality is just an overall fullness. And this is also something connected to what we want to talk about later. So there is one particular action which can, for us, unlock even more musicality without necessarily playing with the music too much. The next one is, of course, the speed of the music. So for those of you who have watched the International and the UK Open in particular, or perhaps danced in it yourselves, you will realize that Ross Mitchell likes to play with the music tempos very, very often, sometimes even during the dance itself. I certainly hope Ross isn't watching, but never mind. So we need to understand how we can dance to the slower music or to the faster music, because we cannot hope to dance the same way. Things do have to change. And this again comes back to the idea of the overall quality. Things, proportions need to be adjusted accordingly to maintain a quality performance. Okay, now this is an interesting one, of course, the timing of the body flight versus the timing of the steps themselves. So the best example, simple example we can give for this is a feather step of the slow foxtrot. So we know, of course, that the timing of the steps of a feather step is slow, quick, quick. Now that, of course, indicates a large step with 2 slightly smaller steps. It also tells us the footwork, it's down, up, up, in a very simple way. But our bodies, our body flight should not be dancing that same timing. And this you can certainly see quite evidently in lower category competitions, where they just dance their body weights on the same timing as the beat itself, of the step itself. Whereas in the case of the feather step in the slow foxtrot, our bodies should be accelerating into the slow and then drifting, or slightly, if you like, decelerating on the quick, quick. We can't be very careful on the slow and then very, very rushed on the quick, quick. So our body weights, our body flights do slightly change. The same with the waltz. We have an acceleration into the 1, even though the beat itself is, of course, quite big, quite long, and quite calm. We do want to see sometimes this increase in body flight compared to the step timing itself. And then the final one connected to music is rhythm, but in this case, the rhythm of movement. Okay, so we have rhythms within the music themselves. We feel, of course, that Latin has a much greater potential to play with rhythms, possibly than ballroom dancers do. But we can indeed, as ballroom dancers, utilize the rhythm of our own movements. And there are 4 categories here. We have impulse, we have impact, we have constant, and we have contract. So I can demonstrate this with my hand for simplicity. So an impulse is something which has a greater energy at the start, which then dissipates out naturally. An impact has a large amount of energy, which stops. Okay. A constant energy is, of course, constant. Very, very simple. And the contraction is where it starts off quite calm, but then at the end, it has this kind of almost impact feeling, but in a much more contained sort of way. Now, this we can really play around with a lot in line figures. You know, we can go into a right lunge, for example. We can hit it with an impact. We can hit it with an impulse. We can choose to keep it constant. The recovery, we can choose to contract. We can really play with this a lot. Of course, the best dance for this is tango, to not always show the same rhythm all of the time. So again, experiment with this idea. It is another very large ingredient, very important ingredient to the overall quality performance. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is an easier one, and we don't need to talk about this too much, but we have choreography. So very, very much open to debate and of course to personal preference. But we have listed a few kind of balance issues that we would like you to think about. And that is difficulty versus simplicity. It is tradition versus innovation. And it is uniqueness versus conformity. So those two are very, very interconnected together. In fact, all three of them are to a certain extent. But if we take the top left, if we make our routines, our choreography too difficult, it's very, very difficult to maintain a very high quality performance, quite simply. We should be at a certain level, a technical level, in order to probably attack or attempt those more complex, difficult routines. But of course, if we go for a simple approach all the way through our routine, not necessarily advisable also. So the key thing here overall is you must find a balance. Now, it may not be 50-50, it may be 80-20, it could be anything at all, depending on you. And that is very, very important. The same with the tradition versus innovation. Now, for us, the traditional figures, the ones that started 100 years ago, they are still very much alive today. They are not fashion choices. They are absolutely the basis of everything in both ballroom and Latin. The more innovative choreographies, they do come and go. They are fashionable. But of course, with fashion, it changes. And so do the innovative ideas. So once again, it is important to have a good ratio, a good balance between your traditional figures, those, if you like, from the technique book, and those which, you know, are a little bit of a development on those basic figures. And the same again, very connected with the uniqueness and the conformity. We don't just want to conform, we all should want to develop things a little bit further. So we should all try to strive for a bit of uniqueness within our choreography. Now, this is a very important point because we feel very strongly about this, that although you can and should get some ideas and help from your teachers with regards to choreography, you should be able to and actually be encouraged to provide your own choreography because it is your own personality that you're trying to show on the competition floor. So of course a teacher can give you a routine, a full routine, but it will be more so connected to their own personal preferences. So we do feel that each couple should very much strive for some independency and individuality when it comes to choreography. Thank you very much. Okay, we are almost there. Thank you for bearing with us. So we come to character. Now, this can be split quite simply, really. We have your own personality, your own individual character, the one that you want to show on the competition floor. So, you know, you should be a character. You should have a certain character on the competition floor. We do not need to be the same as each other, and we absolutely should not be the same as one of our fellow competitors either. And of course, we have the character of the music and also the character of each dance. So they are very much interconnected together. And we feel that to show the true characteristic or characterization of a dance, you should know a little bit of the history of it. We will not go into too much detail about that now because the lecture would need to be 3 hours long. But yeah, you need to understand the history, not just of the dance, but also the figures themselves, to understand and show the character of those dancers or figures and the character of the music through your own expression and through your movement. So this is touching on what we said earlier. You know, you take a waltz, for example, it can be a very melancholy, sad piece of music that you're dancing to. You take the Schindler's List that the Empress Orchestra has recently released, very, very sad, emotional piece of music. We should not look too happy dancing to that. We should not look all jolly and happy because we're not being true artists. We're not reflecting the music through ourselves to the audience. So that is how, in your own expression, you can show the character. And the same through your movement, you know, whether you make things more soft, more subtle, or you go for more bold, positive actions. So if the music changes from round to round, ever so slightly, so should your performance. You should not dance the same way every single round to a certain extent. The technique, of course, is non-negotiable, non-optional, but how you express the music should be subtly different. Okay, and on to the final slide. Oh, that was the final slide, my apologies. So I've already now revealed our main topic, so I'm going to just hide that for a moment. So in conclusion, they were all of the ingredients that we feel every dancer should at least think about and should try to place into their own performance in some quantity. And that is very important because each dancer and indeed each federation, they have the same ingredients, absolutely the same ingredients, but just different priorities on the quantity. So without going and being too controversial, we hear a lot in our federation that the WDSF dancers lack quality. Now, we do feel this is a little bit unfair because I feel that all dancers in all federations have the same qualities, but it's just that they choose a different amount of ones that are important to them. We choose ones which are different, you know, priorities to us. And that we feel is absolutely fine. And each dancer, even from the same federation, should also have these slight differences. This is also very much connected to the idea that we hear again from many coaches that a lot of couples today lack individuality. And we absolutely agree with this. We don't think that you should be able to, for example, tell which country a certain dancer comes from based on how they're dancing. And certainly, we don't feel that you should know which dance club or which dance teacher that couple comes from based on how they're dancing. Because even if you take one club collectively, each individual dancer is different. They have different heights, different proportions with each other, and their own different personalities and tastes. So each couple should be very, very, very different from each other. So you should get the overall package and not just the one priority, if you like, of either the teacher or of the country, which can often, unfortunately, be the case. So we feel that one particular action which is used quite badly or wrongly very, very often is sway. We feel it's often executed over the top, but in other instances, in other couples, sometimes it's not done enough because it's done in the wrong way. So one one analogy and comparison that I would like to talk about is the idea of either a top-down approach to dancing or a bottom-up approach to dancing. Now, what that means is those couples which are focused more on the top line than anything else, that's fine to a certain extent. But once you've perfected that, you can't make it any better. We cannot stretch our arms any further. We can't stretch our shoulders any further or our necks any further. It's very easy to perfect the top line. But sometimes when you're focused so much on the top line, it actually hinders and diminishes the ability to improve your bass action. So we absolutely feel that a bottom-up approach is the absolute best solution. You should always be working on the bass action, on all of the mechanical and technical ingredients that we talked about before, and then put the frame on the top of that. A good analogy is a Formula One car. Now, if you look back at the design, the shape of Formula One cars from even 20 years ago, they are almost identical then to now. Basically, they perfected the aerodynamics and the design of the car 20, maybe even 30 years ago. So they left it alone. What the Formula One companies are constantly striving for is the engine, the efficiency of the engine, the wheels, the brakes, the suspension, all of the mechanical aspects, not necessarily the visual ones. And we feel that can be very much related to a dancer. You should be striving to improve the mechanical work, not just purely going for a visual effect, because it will only take you so far and it will only give you short-term success, not necessarily long-term success, in our opinion. So moving on to our definitely now final slide. This is for us the most important ingredient of them all, the drive action. So this belongs to the mechanics. Now, basically, if you improve this, you will improve many, many other things in turn in a natural way. So the ones that we've included here are sway, CBM, CBMP, slow and fast music, the timing, and musicality. And this is where we touched on a little bit earlier, if you remember. So we feel, particularly, of course, that sway is used wrongly. And this is where we would like now to go to the practical side of things and explain how that works. Okay, so we're going to just use some very basic figures to explain the point. The first being a natural turn in waltz, then a feather step in foxtrot, a 3 fall away group in the foxtrot also, and then finishing off with a running weave, which is connected to the timings that I mentioned also earlier, how we can put and beats into those pieces of choreography and give a completely different look. So, understanding the natural turn and how that relates to the sway. The idea of sway is that it is a natural balancing out of the drive before it. So in other words, if you wish to sway a lot, you should increase the amount of drive that you produce before it. So using, of course, as we all know, the standing leg, the compression, which will lead to more power, producing more power, which will need to be balanced by the sway. So for example, at a very, very low level, if we were to dance our natural turn with very little drive action at all, we should, from a basic level, be able to dance that and finish without any need whatsoever for the sway. So if we do that the other way, just to show you. So if we have very little drive action, we should be perfectly balanced at the top of the swing. No reason at all to sway. Now, what we do see very, very often on the competition floor is that kind of drive action. Sorry to do this to you, Izabela. I'm sorry for those watching at home, but with a very disproportional sway at the end. So a very exaggerated, very ugly sway at the end. So again, very little drive action, but with lots of sway. Now, of course, some of you may enjoy the look of that. And we're not disputing, you should be swaying that much. You should have a fullness, but it should come through the base action. So this comes back to those three questions. Why do we do it? We've already answered that for balance. When do we do it? Now, the sway should always naturally begin at the lowest point of the pendulum swing, okay? Because that's when you are beginning your upswing. So if we can see this from the side, I can probably do this, yeah. 1, 2, 3, there's my drive action, for example. I'll keep it small for a moment. As I pass through and my left leg begins to swing, we can now see a slight displacement of the hips. That is the moment when the sway begins. Now, of course, that will then naturally develop through into the next beat, which will then create the balanced curve that we want at the end, both for man and lady. Now, of course, at the top of that swing, at the point of the closure of the feet, couples have a preference. They can choose either to maintain that natural sway, or you can choose to add in a stretch of the side, what we could actually call a cosmetic sway. That belongs to the WDSF technique book, I believe. But it's an added extra on top. Now, depending on your choreography, you may choose to go for the classic look, or you may choose to enhance it. So if we were to show, hopefully, a more natural looking natural turn, but with a full amount of drive action, we should have the correct proportions throughout the action. So to show you that the other way, 4, 5, we drive, natural swing, natural sway, and lower, for example. So we hope that you could see that everything was proportional to each other. Now, as I say, if we wanted more sway, we would need to drive more, we would need to swing more. So this moves on very nicely into the feather step in the foxtrot. So there is still a drive, there is still a swing. Therefore, there must be some sway. Again, a natural amount. However, the big difference is, of course, that we are passing our feet. So we do not wish to completely arrest the movement and close our feet, as we do in the natural turn of waltz. Therefore, the sway does not need to be as big because we're not perfectly balancing. We are passing through. So to reiterate the point, if I may, just from the side, the drive action in the foxtrot feather step, if I keep it small for a moment, will be exactly the same. The leg swing itself will be exactly the same. That is the moment of when. However, it is now what we do as we transfer through into the quick section, that in the waltz, we would need to arrest that power. In the foxtrot, we would keep that moving through. So we would drive, we would swing naturally. There is our natural sway. And then we would pass through that point. Now, once again, you have a choice. Some couples choose, instead of just going for the classic look on the quick, if you like, of drifting through, they choose either to increase the CBM action, or they also give a slight stretch of the side. Now this, of course, gives a very musical, a very full dynamic look to it. This is your personal choice. If you've danced a very, complex piece of choreography before it, it's possible that you may just want to show that clarity. Or if you've done some very basic amalgamations before it, then you may wish to demonstrate a much fuller action. But what we absolutely cannot accept is something which is seen very, very often these days, we feel, and that is the disproportional sway. Yes, that is not the natural action. So to show you the other way, a disproportional sway is not to be recommended. So to show you the purely classical motion of that first, if we may, we're still in shot. We would have the same drive action and swing, and then we would just drift through the motion. So to show you that the opposite way, we would have the drive action, the swing, and then the natural drift. So we could, as I say, choose if we want to add in a CBM or a side stretch, or even both. So this would just, for example, give a little bit extra, we hope, musicality. Same rules apply here, but then the extra action at the end. One more time. We have the same drive action, the same swing, and then the extra. Okay, back into the shot. So we hope that you can see already how some of those ingredients all link together and how it is necessary to find the proportions and not just to go for the result. That is the danger of watching too many videos sometimes. You see the result, but you don't always understand the mechanics and the technique needed to produce that action in a natural way. So moving on now to the 3 fall away group. We chose this because, again, we feel very, very often it isn't danced very, very well. So a lot of couples who favor the top down approach to dancing, they tend to have 2 faults, either too much sway exaggerated at the wrong time, or not enough sway because they're so focused on maintaining that perfect rigid look. So both of which we feel are not recommended or advisable. So what we should look at are, again, the processes of how they link together. So if we look at the first fall away along our line of dance, just like this for a moment, we have, again, the drive action, which will increase the amount of CBM needed, and then we will have the correct amount of sway as we anchor our legs, our feet. So if danced, for example, wrongly in the first instance, there would be too much artificial fake sway. Again, going for that picture, that result, rather than the mechanics. Or the rigid effect, which is just not advisable either. Certainly not from an efficiency point of view. You do not want to dance like that for 7 rounds, for example. So once again, going through the system, we will have the drive action and the CBM. We will have the natural swing and sway at this point. We will then pass through into the second fall away or the second side lock. Now, because this requires more of a collection, we can increase the sway plane at that point to arrest the movement, to recharge, ready for the next drive into the next natural amount of sway. Now, you may choose, of course, that you don't want to arrest the movement so much on the second fall away or the side lock, that's absolutely fine. So you would only have the proportional amount of natural sway, but without the side stretch or the increase of the CBM action at the end. So to show you what we hope and believe to be a proportional amount, we would have drive and sway and an increase, drive and sway. Okay, so if you can still see us, we will go back towards the camera with the same method. The drive and natural sway, the increase, the drive and natural sway. We're still there, good. Okay, now this brings us on nicely in a slightly related topic, but also with an additional extra. And that is the fourth element, the running weave. So as I hinted at before, we have a choice to make on the timing. So we have an and beat. Now, and beats can go anywhere that you choose, anywhere at all. But of course, you've only got 3 beats. So we can either have a 1 and 2, 3 timing. We can have a 1, 2 and 3 timing. And of course, a 1, 2, 3 and timing. So an important thing to remember is that you should always borrow the music. If you're doing an and beat, you should always borrow the music from the beat before it, because you need that increase in body flight. Again, this is hinting at something we mentioned earlier on that feather step action. The timing itself requires a slightly different proportion of body flight. So we will show you all 3 of those versions first. We will dance them both ways. So 6 versions all together. So the first one being the 1 and 2, 3 timing. So we have 4, 5, 6, 1 and 2, 3. Okay, and we'll do that back towards the camera. 4, 5, 6, 1 and 2, 3. Okay. Now we will dance the 1, 2 and 3 timing. So 4, 5, 6, 1, 2 and 3, 1. Okay. And if we go back the other way, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2 and 3. Okay. So we hope already you can see a subtle difference. We will explain them in a moment. And then the final timing, which is 1, 2, 3 and. Okay. So 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, for example. And back the other way. So 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3 and 1. Okay. So very difficult to talk and dance at the same time. Now, some of those are only subtle differences, as we hope you did see. Now, it depends on what you want to show. It depends also on what's followed, what will follow your running weave figure, or what has come before it. So, as you can see with the 1 and 2, 3 timing, that requires a lot more speed at the start of the bar of music, at the start of the figure. So because that 1 has been cut, we don't have the full drive action. Therefore, we won't have as much natural sway. So the main priority there is on rotation. Then, because of that syncopation, we now have a full 2 and a full 3 beat to enjoy. So if we walk through that, we would have a very quick 1 and. That is our priority, to get back to closed position. Now we can enjoy the latter half of the bar of music. So we can use the rise and fall. We can use, again, CBM, a stretch of the side. That can sometimes lead the girl, as Izabela showed, to turn her head. Not necessary, it is a choice. But you're giving yourself that chance, that possibility, based on the timing. So Now that we've demonstrated that to you, we will dance that timing once again. And 4, 5, 6, 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So the second timing, which is the 1, 2, and 3, you can clearly see that the 1 is the full amount. Okay. But then because of the syncopation on the 2 and 3, we lose a little bit of possibility at the end of the bar. So because we have a full drive on 1, we can have the possibility for a full swing and a full sway. So we have 1, but now we have a very quick 2 and 3. So it loses the potential to breathe the shape at the end, but you are gaining something in the drive action at the start of the figure. So once again, it's all about proportions. It's all about balance. So we will show you that timing now all the way through. So we have, and 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And then the third and final timing, which was the 1, 2, 3, and. So what this means is we have even more potential to swing and sway at the first half of that group, but we have even less time, a more limited time at the end of the figure. So the rise, for example, must not be as high. It must be a much more shallow approach. We don't have the possibility to stretch our bodies and sway and create CBM the way we did in the first option. But again, you're gaining a fluid opening to that. So for example, that would be 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. So we treat, in that case, the 3 and more as a collection into the next figure. So we're showing a fullness on entry into that figure based on the principles that we've mentioned already, the same order, drive action, natural swing, natural sway, etc., etc. So we hope that you can see there how the ingredients can be applied in different ways. So we hope that based on our earlier boards, we perhaps have given you some new ideas, perhaps certain qualities that you haven't thought about. So if that's the case, then absolutely great. But the main thing we feel to take away from today is the balance of all of them together. So going back to the amazing, wonderful responses I got from the high-level dancers, it is the balance of everything. It's the excellence of each category, which is very important to producing an overall quality performance. So thank you very much indeed. We hope you're still awake and alive, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Thank you so much, Isabella. That was a very great and detailed lecture.